I'm not going to take any more of your time, Jessica. I will hand it over to you as our panel takes us through securing the future, CISO insights, and industry leaders discussing current cyber threats and strategic defense practices. Take it away. The next hour is yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. How close do I have to get to this mic? All right, is that good? Can you hear me now? As you heard, I'm Jessica Sica. I'm the head of security at Weave. I've been doing security for over 20 years, unfortunately. It's been a while. It's been a long road. Last 10 years running security programs. Before Weave, I was CISO at Petco. Happy to pass it on to the next members of our panel here to introduce themselves.
I'm Raj Arora. I am part of the US Bank now, which was earlier US Bank. I'm working into the industry from last 20 plus years, and I'm in San Diego from last 7 years. But I have worked across the globe, different countries, different cities. But now I'm hang up in San Diego now. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. My name is Carmen Parada. I am a security specialist. I found a company about 10 years ago around my skills, and I coming from IT since I graduated college. So now what it was network security becomes cybersecurity. So I am one of the advisors, and my company provides advisory services to government and state and local, as well as corporations like Apple Inc. So we're very proud to provide services to them and advisory services.
Hi there. My name is Irvin. I'm in charge of 3 departments, one of worldwide company regarding exception requests. So I'm in charge of that for one important big company. And another department that I'm in charge of is inherent risk assessments through the year for a financial institution. And also I work as a consultant for Google.
All right, we have a lot of topics to discuss. We prioritize them in case we don't get through them all. So we are actually going to start, Irvin already has the microphone, so we're going to start with him on emerging threats. What are the most significant emerging cybersecurity threats, and how should organizations prepare for them?
Yes, well, basically, we have seen several reports from, for example, CrowdStrike, 2024 reports, and you will see the summary where there's a lot of spider threats, different names of the spiders, where they're aiming to the cloud services, to data exfiltration, to get that golden ticket, get those identities, usernames, and passwords. And how can we protect against these threats on the cloud? Well, basically, we established a strategy, zero trust strategy, and several cloud providers. For example, I'm not promoting Google or anything. I'm cloud agnostic. But for example, just an example, GCP has Google Cloud Services on the cybersecurity menu. And when you define a perimeter, then you have the control of the ingress, egress, network flows, and even you can tighten that access to even users, projects, and so forth. One of the key questions when I have these exception requests worldwide is the word automate. The justification is for automation on microservices. So when I mention whether it's Azure or GCP and establish and build the project, this is just an example. You can go ahead in Google Cloud, use cloud services controls, and define a perimeter, and you'll have more control against these emerging threats.
I can add a little bit to that. So, yeah, we all see a lot of emerging threats in today's and in the future, and we have learned a lot about how to attack those. I think one of the best practices that I've seen during my career, it is identifying these threats and preparing on how you're going to respond to these threats. I think having a team and monitoring the systems that in guarding your crown jewels is the best way of attack these ones, because you always can have all these procedures written, but if you don't know how to approach it every time that you see something, because something is different every day. So by training your teams, your security operations center on how to react to these attacks or how to prepare, it's been the best practice I have seen so far.
Yeah, I have few points that, some of these threats what we have. We were talking in the last session about the AI, right? So AI can definitely automate and enhance all our malicious activities, and cyber attacker can exploit AI algorithms. So AI can be used both ways, right? To me, that it can be used for good as well as for, the malicious actor can also use that AI, which is a, very hot topic these days also, right? How to put that AI to, the like fair use of AI. So that's one point. And Internet of Things, right? So as we know that IoT devices, right? We are getting more prevalent these days, right? Whether you are at home, everyone wants to be smart, whether it's at home or, smart devices or, your the TV, refrigerator, whatever you take, right? Or, your security camera, everywhere you can't escape from the IoT devices, and it's growing day by day. So that's adding more and more challenges to the cybersecurity emerging, threats. One of that. Um I think those are the two main points I wanted to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Don't forget about the human element of it. If you know what the emerging threats are, but you're not training your employees, you're not training your engineers on them, they may not know. You might think they're obvious. You might think, oh, everybody knows about prompt injection and what the risks are. But if they don't know and you're not training them, then there's a gap there. So make sure you're staying on top of that with your emerging threats as well. So next topic, we're going to talk about cloud security. We're going to start with Raj here. With the increasing resilience on cloud services, what are the key challenges and best practices for ensuring robust cloud security?
So the biggest cloud challenges, as we were talking earlier, the lack of visibility, right? So because it's a cloud, every cloud has hundreds of components, and every component has thousands of different configurations. So where to switch on and off, that's something, we need to do it very prudently. So that's the lack of visibility is something very hard to make it, to respond to the incidents, assess the data, verify the control, your identity and access management, which is a key portion, critical component of the cloud that needs to be secure to prevent there is no data breach, Insecure APIs, right? Because now we have talking about that first API, right? Our whole approach in the last few years have changed from the code first to the API first. And as APIs are gaining more and more popularity, I see that, the insecure API contribute to a lot to this cybersecurity, the cloud threat. And the misconfiguration, we were talking about that a little bit more earlier, that, when a company cloud-based system is not configured correctly, it can leave the business vulnerable to the hackers. Account hijacking, that's another thing, right? We work with a lot of partners, a lot of vendors. Account hijacking has, very more chances to happen. Insider threat, someone, the employee who is leaving or who has been, fired, there may be, chance of that. Insider threat, compliance. So when we move our data to the cloud, we need to deal with a whole different realm of the insecurity in the cloud. We need to see that, how that cloud provider is compliant with those, the compliance you need for your industry, whether it is your SOX compliance or it's your CCPA or other compliant. And when it comes to the multi-cloud environment, it becomes more complex because now, and I'm sure, every big corporation has multi-cloud environment. It's not just limited to one cloud. And when it becomes a multi-cloud environment, it becomes more complex. The visibility we were already, dealing with that challenge of visibility, and in a multi-cloud environment, it's much more prominent. And so in multi-cloud environment, it's becomes very difficult to know that where the data is stored, located. Security policies. Every cloud has different set of policies. So how to make sure that, to deal with all different cloud provider security, that's an important aspect to understand. Protection of the data, that include the data breaches when a malicious user gain access to the cloud. Access management, it's not just Azure is bringing their own Active Directory. AWS has a different role-based access control. Google Cloud Provider has different access control. So how do we deal with all three, different the access control mechanism? Not to mention the network access control list is different in different cloud providers. Same goes for the encryption. So these are the challenges I see in the cloud, and some of the thoughts which I have, for this is that how can we automate the security? So in terms of that, we were talking earlier about that the CM, the incident events management. How do we make sure that we are going across the cloud and giving a one user dashboard for that? So there should be some way of automate that. I'm sure there are a lot of the vendors also helping us out on this. Synchronize the policies. The policies are different across different providers. Security policies, we need to synchronize them to make sure that we synchronize the policy at one place. And then consolidate our monitoring. That's a very important part, because unless we consolidate the monitoring across the cloud, it's very hard to respond to those events. And then the few more points, like regularly review your, the data, your account activity for suspicious, because new and, things get introduced into the cloud. Every time you have to review that. And reduce this attack surface by eliminating vulnerability in your authentication process. So cloud security policy, it's an important part of any organization. Maintain visibility and control. This is another point. I think we need to make sure that all the data is categorized as per its relevance. So that's my view on this cloud.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, as I mentioned, just to reinforce regarding cloud security, when you have the instances and you have the budget, we already go for buying the instances, hardening instances from CISO's benchmark. And if not, you can perform your hardening by yourself, applying the CIS agent. So, yeah, I have been working in compliance several years. And one of the effectiveness that I have been able to help several industries to be ISO 27001 compliant and so many other standards, for example, SOC 2, are to have more beyond compensating controls, to have those hardening instances or those controls on the infrastructure, critical assets. So once I have the evidence, I can always walk in the auditors, whether it's any kind of firm that is performing the audit. Once I show the evidence and the controls are in place, it always helped me out to approve those ISO 27001 certifications.
And just to add a little bit more, I think both of you are already addressed every single point of what it entails to be secure in the cloud. I would just add that think like an auditor, right? So every time you upload something on the cloud, you get a small or large implementation on the cloud. Just ask yourself if those controls are there. Choose your framework and tie to your framework, making sure they all align to your cloud security and all the components that are there to secure your data, your assets, everything that you put in the cloud. So I think this.
I have a little bit of a second part to this. So how can organizations strike the right balance between innovation and security when adopting cloud technologies?
Yes, one of the questions regarding it is to when you study a certification to be a CISO, one of the keys is always balance. Sometimes implementing a solution like Palo Alto Prisma Cloud is quite costly or expensive. You always have to be the benefit and have a balance, whether the budget and the profit that you're doing. So sometimes, I mean, it's nothing better to have much security and these awesome tools, automated tools, but you have to keep in mind to have a balance to it, because if you don't have the budget, even though you want to ask for Prisma Cloud, you're not going to be able to get it due to the lack of finances. But nevertheless, there's several strategies, as I mentioned in the past, like zero trust strategies and Titan, even from the network switches, once you plug in, for example, Cisco routers and Cisco switches, when you plug in the cables and you unplug them, you perform these certain configurations to block the ports. So, so many little things like that. You always have to keep in mind the benefits and the cost, the financial cost of it, and have a balance to it. But yeah, those are one of the things that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, so I think it's very hard. This is, how to balance the innovation and the security posture at the same time. And I can speak to a few more points on that because I work for the startup as well as the big corporates. So I know that, the big corporates takes years to adopt even, the operating system, right? Operating 2012, it will come into the big corporate after 5 years. But, the startup will adopt it immediately. So I think the approach to that, to me, is that risk-based approach. How much is the risk for that? And the one of the the area which we are trying to improve is that to do more proof of concept, right? To do that more proof of concept and add our additional layer of security policy, whatever we have from our corporate. So that helps you to so that we don't stifle that the innovation which wants to we want to let them to thrive. At the same time, we want to adopt and use that for our best of the purpose.
All right, so I just wanted to add to this. I think it depends a little bit on your type of company as well. If you're working in a highly regulated company, it's a lot easier to put some guardrails around cloud security. If you're working in a SaaS company, I work for a SaaS company, we build things fast, we build things quick, the developers need to be fast, they need to make changes fast. You just have to put safety nets, really, because when they fall, and they will fall, right? They will put PII in a publicly exposed bucket that you didn't expect. You just need to have the right tools and processes in place. So it is possible to enable them to give themselves enough rope, so to speak, but that you have some protections on the back end so that when they do something they shouldn't be, you catch it or block it. The next topic is going to be IoT security. So as the Internet of Things expands, what security considerations are paramount and how can vulnerabilities in IoT devices be addressed?
Start with that. Yeah. So I think, as I was mentioning earlier, right, IoT is something unavoidable, and in today's modern living world, right, we are living and breathing IoT every day, right? So we walked into the room, we go out of the room, we go into our car, we go out to our house. IoT is everywhere. So and because we have so many devices, we kind of feel little bit okay, like very relaxed about that the IoT security. But it has also the important data, like your blood pressure is being monitored, right? Or your blood sugar is being monitored and it's being transmitted to somewhere. So as long as it's related to you, it's no different than what is that corporate is also storing the same data actually. So IoT to me is that it's a paramount to the Internet of the Things, because these are also vulnerable to the cyber attacks, as we have seen recently. In last month, you see that it was used for a different purpose, but every device is susceptible to the cyber attacks, including the IoT. and because of their interconnected nature, they can respond two ways. It's not like you have a calculator, it does not respond, right? So you can't hack the calculator, but you can definitely hack something which is two-way communication. And sorry, I got lost. One sec.
Yes, regarding IoT devices, my friends in front of me, they have from a background of discipline, and they like triathlons and that kind of disciplines. We have Garmin's, and you have noticed that sometimes IoT, even they measure your heart rate and so forth. Garmin had an security incident, and sometimes we were running and like it marked the watch that we had a heart attack. That was a false positive, of course. I mean, so I can relate that IoT is everywhere, and it's since the firmware is not updated, or the developers are not, or companies are not investing to develop firmware and address these vulnerabilities on an enterprise level. One of the things that helped me out to treat these vulnerabilities is to treat them as a legacy systems. So in a legacy system, for example, in order for me to support Walmart printers and their Walmart bought those printers, barcode printers or barcode scans, handhelds 20 years ago. In order for me to support Walmart products, I need to have these old operating systems and applications. So I treat them as a legacy systems, and around legacy systems, I put compensating controls, I put EDR agents, and so many things and policies in order for even the infrastructure environment where those assets are set in, whether on the cloud or on-premise or hybrid, I put, as she mentioned, guardrails around them. So I treat those IoT as legacy systems. I put them on a different network segment and so forth, geofence and so many things that there are on the market. So just keep in mind that IoT are vulnerable. They're not quite often developers to update those frameworks. So that helped me out.
And just to add a little bit more of that, I think you mentioned that we treat this IoT as legacy systems. The reason why is because we're still in the early stages of maturing on securing those Internet of Things. So the best practice that I have seen so far is just monitor your devices in real time. Have your platforms that actually gives you information in real time. And segmentation is very important because you can segment it, you can just separate it from your entire IT or operations, so you can make sure that all those devices are secure in a different platform or a different outside your regular business operations, so you can have a different segmentation and protection over those Internet of Things. Also, choose your policies, privileged access management. You know who have access to those devices, so you have more control over.
So I think I just got my train of thought back. So encryption, right? So I think secure communication, as Carmen was mentioning, right? So secure communication to the endpoint is very important. But whether you use it, earlier it was SSL, now it's TLS. The next level is the DTLS, right? So we go through that process to make sure that the communication is secure. Authentication, as you mentioned, right? And another important point, I see that, keeping device up to date, right? Because often, we see that vulnerability in the software and the firmware. So we need to make sure that, our software and the firmware, hardware are up to date actually on that, because that's the key for the hackers to find out that what are the vulnerability were in the previous version. And if you are on the previous version of software or hardware, they will try to take advantage of that. Network segmentation, as Carmen mentioned, this is very, very super important point, because your data which is coming through IoT devices, and if it gets the way to the core system, it's going to impact your business. So you want to make sure that network segmentation for these IoT devices is done in such a way that hackers cannot reach to your main system. So that's very super important point. And other, important points are like risk assessment, conduct a risk assessment thoroughly on a periodic basis, and educate the user.
So I have a question for everybody here. How many people are 100% sure you know every device on your network that is connecting out to the internet? You can't protect what you don't know about, right? So if you have these devices on your network, we at Petco, we didn't even know that all of our gym equipment was connecting out to the internet. We didn't know about it until we were analyzing the logs, and we were like, what are these IP addresses? So we blocked it. They didn't. The treadmill didn't need to connect out to the internet, and so instead of making sure it was patched, we just blocked all of the devices that were in the gym. So I think that's important to remember, is that you need to know what's there first, and then everything that was already said. Great advice for protecting. So we're going to talk about regulatory compliance next. The first question I'm going to hand to Carmen. How can organizations effectively navigate and comply with evolving security regulations and standards?
Yeah, so compliance is always that subject of, what is our regulatory systems, right? So the first thing we always look at is what kind of compliance we have. Depends on what operations you have. So always be on top of your compliance. Always be on top of new regulatory compliance that ties to your business operations, ties to your main core security policies. Creating policies is a great idea. However, it's a better idea to make sure that those policies are actually implemented and actually are operating with your standards. So one of the things that I have seen is that collaboration with other entities, but you know what the compliance are. You can always be compliance, but just make sure that all your operations are tied to the compliance, like HIPAA compliance, like SOC 2. Yes. So there's different compliance. PCI compliant is you are a payment system. So make sure that all those regulations tie to your systems. I have seen many corporations that are miss one compliance, and there is regulatory audits that is happening every year where they don't meet the compliance, and they just struggle at meeting those compliance, just proving that they're doing something about it. And they have time frames. We have time frames where the compliance need to be done by a certain time. Just make sure that you plan for it, because just putting controls for those compliance and prove that you are complying with those, it takes time. Sometimes there's easier compliance than you can resolve in months, but most of them takes probably more than 6, sometimes over a year. So that's probably the best advice on that.
Yeah, I wanted to share some experience. Some of you guys know Aristocrat, the corporate office in Las Vegas, which is a gaming company. I was able to be in charge of the PCI DSS compliance for a couple of years. And one of the key aspects of being compliant is to talk to several directors, and those directors pass along the messages to their managers in order for them, like, for example, the Border Patrol, when you're coming from the U.S. to Mexico and they're asking you questions, just limit to say yes, no, or focus on what they're asking. Do not elaborate, because in so many times your coworkers elaborate and they think giving more than enough information, they're going to pass the audit, but it's the contrary, because the auditor, ask more follow-up questions, and it takes more time to do that. Also, one of the key parts is, for example, if you need to be GDPR compliant, you have games all over the world, and you have to be GDPR compliant. Work with your legal team and always have a data retention policy. Sorry. So why? Because I work in a telecom company, and I talked to the director from big data department, and I asked him, hey, are you gathering all the information of the USA citizens, like emails, addresses, and I asked him, what kind of data are you collecting? And he's like, I'm collecting everything. And I'm like, why? Oh, because I can. So that's not a right attitude to go towards regulations. So always have those policies that she mentioned. And as I said before, just focus on when you have the audit, in order for you to be compliant, focus on the questions and do not elaborate. That helped me out through the career.
Yeah, as Irvin said, make sure you have a really good relationship with your legal team. You definitely want to lean on them pretty heavily when it comes to these regulations and compliance. One more question on compliance. What role does regulatory compliance play in shaping cybersecurity practices and policy?
So, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, what role does regulatory compliance play in shaping security practices and policy?
What role?
Yeah.
You want to answer that question? Okay. So one of the roles that we always the chief information security officer has to have a risk officer, someone that is looking at the risk. Someone is looking at what is going to happen if we don't put this control. I think earlier in the conversation you mentioned just make sure you do your cost-benefit analysis, right? Mm-hmm. How much is going to cost you to implement a control? But most importantly, how much is going to cost you if you don't implement the control and then you get hacked, or you actually need to pay a fine for not implementing the regulatory compliance. So risk information officers are always needs to be on top of these matters and talking with your legal team, talking with your insurance policies, talking about your contracts, about your supply chains, all your technologies and you're acquiring, how much risk you're acquiring by acquiring those platforms as well. So that's.
And also for GDPR, you need and you're required to have a data compliance officer. So just keep in mind for that. Data compliance officer, correct?
Yeah, I think one of the role, it just reminded me that, you would have seen that, that chief data officer is one of the new, the role which is upcoming, because data is everywhere and data sprawling is obviously there. They need to track where and how that, from all the entire life cycle, it needs to go into the right hand. So there is a important position now for all the big organization is that chief data officer. So that's also part of the security.
Yes, and in order to have a better security for example, I did a proof of concept with Google to prevent data exfiltration. And as I mentioned in the past, I implement perimeter using these cloud service controls. So yeah, just keep in mind, if you're going to ask for PII, just let the user know what kind of PI, be specific, whether it's an IP or GPS location or whatever, and ask for consent. It has to be clear and express consent. And once you have that, just make sure that you have a mechanism to always opt out whenever the user wants to get their data erased.
That's great. One more thing I want to say about compliance is, obviously, if you need budget and you have to do something, compliance is a great hammer to use to get that budget. But be careful that security doesn't become compliance. Pretty soon, all they say is, oh, we're just doing this because we need to be compliant, and they lose sight of security for the sake of doing the right thing. So make sure you're reminding people that when you're doing these things, you're reminding your engineers and your leadership that security is doing the right thing and not just a chore to be compliant. So, but again, definitely use it if you need to get budget. Just don't let it get carried away and all of a sudden everything is compliance and everything is a chore. Okay. I think we have time for one more topic, which is security awareness training. What innovative approaches and technologies are being employed in security awareness training programs, and how effective are they at reducing risk? I can certainly go first on this. I've had some experience at my last few companies. Awareness training needs to be regular, first of all. It needs to be constant. It needs to be almost annoying. It needs to be in front of your employees all the time, at least weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever you're doing. You need to do phishing tests. Phishing is still the #1 way that companies get hacked, right? So they get in via an email. So if you aren't doing phishing training and exercises on a regular basis, then you're missing out. I think one of the important things to remember now with AI is what you told people in the past about how to avoid phishing attacks isn't the same. You can't look for errors in grammar. You can't look for punctuation errors because those don't exist that much anymore, right? They're using AI to write these messages. So if English isn't their first language, it looks like it is because the emails are more sophisticated. So you need to make sure you're doing that. We have a tool, some of you know before. They actually have a pretty good feature where you can do advanced automated training. So if people are passing the phishing test, it gets harder. It gets harder and harder, and it gets to a certain level where, if they fail the difficult ones, then it lowers their level again. But it's more adaptive. I've seen that effectively lower training or phishing clicks. At Pecco, it went down from about 12% to 5% over 9 months. We have similar results at my current company. So keeping it front of mind, keeping it adaptive, and making sure you're following up with how to avoid phishing. Don't just test them and say, haha, you failed. Tell them why. Make sure you're doing a lot of why you failed and what to look out for.
I can add a little bit to that. I think like Jessica mentioned, explain your team why, right? This is very important why, but I think, and I have seen that it's now we need to focus on the how, right? Because the why everybody understands is that the threats are more sophisticated, but now how we can react to that, and by giving your employees or your people how to react and how to report and how to be involved in incident response, it gives them a bigger perspective. I have one case where in the hospital, someone clicked on a file that infected a lot of devices in the hospital, and there was lives dependent on that. So when we start understanding how much is affecting the third party or something that we don't see, it says that's when we started to get more interested on, now I need to put attention and how I'm going to do that. So getting your employees involved in incident response and the whole process, that gives us a better perspective and more attention on how they can react and be involved in that. So I think that's one of the things I've seen.
Good. All right, we're going to do one more question then. We have time for one more question, and it's about supply chain. Are we ready for Q&A? Yeah? Okay. We'll skip that one, do Q&A.
So I have a question that reverts back to the last question that you guys answered. And by the way, I'm Jeff. I'm the ISSM at the Recruit Depot here in San Diego for the Marine Corps. And my question would be is, you guys talk about compliancy and whatnot, which is, great, but how do you guys, ensure that your guys' network is secure? Do you guys, like for the Marine Corps, we get an ATO, we go through rigorous, compliancy and STIG checks and controls and whatnot, and we go through the risk management framework. Does the civilian sector do the same? Because if not, that right there, we use the NIST 8000. What do you guys use to make sure your guys' network and everything else is secure?
Yeah. So I think it's more important because especially I'm talking about the financial industry. I can tell you one example that they have their own what we call it as the private connection with the cloud for the on premises, just to make sure that we are not using the public VPN or public the line for transmitting the data. So they have their own line of the data if they want to move from on premises to the cloud, just to give you that perspective of the significance. And then there are additional layer they add, right? There is no public IP on any of the virtual machine or EC2 instance in AWS. It's a no-go actually for that. And then you use the tables, right? You use all the root tables to ensure that only if there is some hacking happen, it happen only limited to that area. So network segmentation everywhere is very important. So you have those layers. If I have a database layer, it's on its own word actually, network subnet actually. And if I have if I have let's say three layer application, right? We have a front end and middle layer and the back end, right? So I make sure all of them are segmented, and also we make sure that it's assigned to the different the cloud zone, because if some region failed, I am not relying only on one region if I have all my 3 application in one region, right? So I'm making sure that all my different the layers are in different zones, so that if one zone goes down, I still have 2 zones up actually. So it's very prudent actually, in that sense, I would say that. So that's how we do.
Yeah, so for example, depends on the company. I have done consulting, whether for industries, construction industries, gaming industries, and so forth. In order for us to be compliant, depends on the budget. If the companies, they don't have budget, I always push NIST, Special Publication 800. So I go towards that. I do a maturity assessment. So I get to the company, and then I do a cybersecurity risk assessment and to see the level of maturity. Once I determine the level of maturity, 1 to 5, and I say, you're a number 2, but you can increase 0.5 in the next couple of years or in the next 12 months. But you have to do these controls because you don't have, let's say, data retention policies and so many things. So yeah, I always focus on NIST. But as I said, for example, this gaming company from Las Vegas, they needed to be GDPR compliant, so we had different frameworks for different things. So it depends on the company. So, but yeah, I always push NIST.
So basically what I'm hearing is that none of your guys' network has been validated, and I can tell you my network has been validated and it is secured by the DoD. And if you take a step back and look, there has been more civilian networks that's been hacked than the DoD throughout the last 15, 20 years. And it's because, and it's just food for thought in putting it out there for everybody here, because that's why we're here, is because the civilian sector is not following the common core practice that we need to follow. That's correct. And if we follow the common core practice, we'd be more secure in this. So if you guys want, we can talk afterwards, because I am a USMC validator, and I have validator. I'm one of the 2 validators on the West Coast through the Marine Corps. So there's not that many. But there are, I guarantee you, I could go into any of these civilian practices and find flaws in every single one. Just throwing that out there for everybody, because there are issues. If you don't validate your network and are not NIST compliant, I guarantee you somebody can hack your network.
What?
Probably true. Any other
That's
questions?
correct. And case in point, there's a company that it's a supermarket company. I'm not going to mention their name. I went to their server room and I plug in my laptop with an RJ45 cable network, and I was able to connect. So when I unplug it, I noticed that they didn't have this, he mentioned, this common sense where you automatically, from the switch side, you set it up in a way where like you turn off that port so it will stop the communication. And I'm 100% on board with what he said. And if we follow the best practice and common sense, I mean, we will be way better off.
And just something to add to that, Jeffrey. So Jeffrey, right, is your name? Jeff? Jeff. Yeah, so you're right. So we all know that we are in the infancy of security. Every time it is a new threat, every time we utilize more needs for the cloud, more regulatory compliance. I think one of the best practice I've seen is the collaboration between all these entities like the Homeland Security, CISA, so where they actually every day they're reporting new threats, sharing, and by sharing, because in this industry we're sharing our success, but nobody stands up and sharing what did not work, nobody wants to talk about it. We are in the infancy. I think the sharing what did not work will help us more than sharing what is making us secure and successful.
You're absolutely correct. And that's why I did what I did out there, so everybody understands where we're at.
More collaboration, that will be probably very secure world.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I think on that same line, right? Not many data breaches are also reported into the public also, right? So there are so many data breaches happen. It does not come to the public, so that does not go into the statistics also. So nobody wants to talk that where they failed actually, because they just don't want to keep it.
I've been preaching this for 2 years. Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it or they can't talk about it, one of the two. Any other questions? Okay, get the mic over there.
How important is zero trust in today's society?
Check, check.
There we go.
Check, check. Just wanted to ask, how important is zero trust in today's society?
Yeah, I think I was talking about that zero trust architecture, right? Because it's gaining more and more importance in our today security strategy, because everybody is malicious until it's proven right? So in terms of the access, right? If I am a developer, I should get only the developer access. If someone is admin, he should get the admin access. So there is a segmentation of duties should be clearly laid out so that, it's not that one person has all the rights on that system, right? So to say that. And then that's more about, mostly on the control part, right? What we are talking at. And same thing goes with our, the different layers, right? What we are talking about, like I was talking about that transport layer security, right? Some companies are still using 128-bit, right? While we have 256 also, in play right now. And I see that, when we go into the different types of storage in the cloud where we host the data, right? They still don't have the encryption. Some of them still don't have the encryption to make sure that, so the zero trust is the most important. I would put it at first, right, to define that, all my strategy actually. So it's very important. Yeah.
But I think we just need to realize that zero trust is it's not a technology, it's a journey, right? It's a continuous improvement. So it is a continuous looking at what is missing in the orchestration of your security, because it's not just one component. It is actually probably 80% processes and 20% technology.
Yeah, I think Carmen said that right. It's not a technology. There's a lot of vendors that are going to sell you their zero trust technology, but it's about more than that. It's more about your process and your procedures, and it's very important. It's hard to get there for a lot of companies, but it's definitely the goal. Any more questions?
Can you describe the steps for an automated incident response? Like, what does that look like in reality or in theory? Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see that. That sounds great.
So I think for anything to be automated, when you say, it should be a real-time response, right? So in order to reach there, to that end goal of real-time response to any security breach or vulnerability which has happened, right? You need to have the collection of all the, the data points, which has this logs, like, so all the logs monitoring, right? And then you find any anomalies in that data, right? You try to see that, okay, is it something, you can sit on that for some time, or it immediately needs to take some action. So that's when, and it's all part of that, the security incident event management system, right? So I see that, this is should be more real time, because it should not be that, something happened yesterday night and we came to know only today morning. So it's more and more real time, and that's where the challenge is, right? How do I process that vast amount of data which is, I'm collecting every day, and trying to make sense out of that data and give that, this is the noise which I have to suppress, this is the data which I have to carry forward and immediately act on this, and something, I need to alert to the user, or, some action needs to be taken. So this is what I feel.
Right, so you want to know the process.
Well, what does it look like in the real world?
That what it looks.
You
In
know
the
what I
real
mean?
world, really, in the perfect world,
Yeah.
okay? So preparation is everything. I think that by training your teams on how to have an incident response plan updated with all the information needed to who is going to be the first respondents, it is the best case scenario.
Okay.
So, and not only that, you can build it today, but it can change tomorrow, because tomorrow your network admin is gone. It's already out of the company. Now you need to update that document, right? You want to add that?
Yeah, I just want to share some experience since we're in October. A horrible experience 2 years ago. We have this manufacturing company over there in Tijuana. We have 20,000 people working there creating the iPhones. So we had a major incident and major disruption where what happened, they called me. So I traveled there to just help them out. How does it look like? All the CEOs and all the directors are in panic. They're always buying pizza, soda, and everything right there. And they're always asking you every single 20 minutes. It's like a little kid. Are we there yet? So it's like you have tons of pressure. And our strategy was, let's do a zero trust. Let's start from scratch. I was a consultant. I got there, noticed they didn't have EDR, no firewalls, egress, no network flow control, no firewall policy. So we went there and we assumed everything was compromised. Every single server, the payrolls. So I talked to the director of the payroll and said, you know what? Pay the same thing that you're going to pay the employees for the last week. Then later on, we're going to see the difference 2 weeks from this incident. So we work around the clock 2 hours, non-stopping. And we implement, it was on-site infrastructure. So we start from scratch. Obviously, we did the hardening with the SIS controls, and then we installed the software and we pull up the critical assets in order for the company to keep on going and running. After a week, everything was restored and people were coming back to work. But on a real scenario basis, you are in charge of that amount of pressure where like the directors and the stakeholders are always pressuring you. They have meetings every couple of hours and they're always asking for status. So that's the real world. And I answered that question. How important is the zero trust strategy? Is very important. It helped me out on a real world incident. So yeah, I hope that answers somewhat your question.
I think to some extent what you're asking, automated incident response is
Automated, yeah.
automated. I don't think we're fully there yet, honestly.
Yeah, what
I
does
think
that
we're
even
going to
look-
start to see a lot more
Because it does
sophisticated. What was that?
It requires some human manual
It does.
intervention after the automation gets you to the alert.
Correct.
Then
Someone
the
who owns
CSERT
those
team-
processes, yeah. Someone that needs to own those processes step by step. There are six main processes to get to the bottom, from preparation to lessons learned. So I think that having drills every year on how people can react to incidents. We do incident response even in very light alerts, like vulnerabilities on Teams, for example. Like things like that. Like those are very easy exercise because we're pretending that we are reacting to a threat or a vulnerability. And those are very easy to just go step by step. But I think it is, like you mentioned, Jessica, we are in the infancy. A lot of organizations don't have a team that it can drive those exercises, or everybody is very busy making sure that the operations are running, implementing new technologies, implementing new controls, funding and defunding technologies, all technologies for new technologies. I mean, it is definitely, it's a different department that I think is also a little bit separate from the Chief Information Security Officer, the Risk Officer, and so on and so forth. It's just, it is like a lot of preparation, like a hot side, a cold side. Make sure that your data is backed up. I mean, it is so much involved that you just mentioned, and it is a whole world right there.
So I do have a follow-up. Or
Yeah, and I want to mention that also for the automation, you have to have a big budget for BCP and DRP. Well, you have a huge database, Oracle databases, and as she said, you have data scenario hot swap versus hot swap, hot and cold, and so forth. And one of the compliance control, or for example, is to practice that a year. You practice, you turn off a database server and see if kicks in the automation, which is the replication with the database, in this case Oracle, but that's costly. But if you have the budget, yeah, you can set that up, and you have to practice that once a year.
All right, we are at time. Thank you, everybody. I know they're going to do a few parting words here, so don't go anywhere yet. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you for those questions. Everybody benefits for that.
I just want to ask you guys to give them one more round of applause, because they could literally be anywhere and they chose to be here today, and they're super busy, and so we really appreciate them. And you guys, the bar's still open, so go get a cocktail. I also want to